What if I told you one tank completely changed how the world builds tanks forever? At the start of World War II, Soviet tanks like the T-28 were already struggling. Big, heavy, and easy targets. But then, everything changed. The T-34 arrived. Sloped armor, high mobility, a gun powerful enough to shock German forces the first time they saw it. Were Soviet medium tanks actually the best of World War II, or were they just built in such numbers that they overwhelmed everything? Let's break them all down. T-28. The T-28 is one of the Soviet Union's earliest attempts at a true medium tank. Developed in the early 1930s and entering production in 1933. Production continued until 1941 with roughly 500 units built. It was designed as a breakthrough tank intended to lead assaults against fortified positions and support infantry advances. It has a large crew of 6, commander, driver, main gunner, loader, and additional machine gunners for its secondary turrets. While this allows multiple targets to be engaged, it also makes coordination more complex. The main weapon is a 76.2mm KT-28 or later L-10 gun. This gun is effective against infantry, fortifications, and early light vehicles, but lacks the penetration needed against later tanks. It is supported by multiple DT machine guns, giving it strong anti-infantry coverage. Armor ranges from 20 to 50mm, using riveted and bolted armor. While this seems decent on paper, the lack of sloping and the large silhouette make it vulnerable. It is powered by a 500 horsepower engine, allowing speeds of around 40 kilometers per hour, though real performance often feels slower due to its size. The biggest advantage is firepower spread. It can engage multiple infantry threats at once, but the disadvantages are significant. Large size, weak effective armor, and poor survivability against anti-tank weapons. Fun fact, during the Winter War, some T-28s received additional armor plates, making them surprisingly resilient for a short period. Tip: keep it behind infantry and use it to suppress enemy positions. Never expose it to enemy anti-tank units. T-34, Model 1940. The T-34 Model 1940 is one of the most important tank designs in history. Developed in 1940 as a replacement for older Soviet tanks, it introduced a revolutionary combination of sloped armor, mobility, and firepower. Production quickly ramped up, with thousands built during the early years of the war. It has a crew of 4, commander, gunner, loader, and driver. However, the commander often had to double as the gunner, reducing overall efficiency. Its main weapon is the 76.2mm F-34 gun. This gun offers strong penetration for its time and can defeat most early German tanks. Secondary armament includes DT machine guns for infantry defense. Armor ranges from 15 to 45mm, but the key detail is the sloping. This dramatically increases effective protection and causes many enemy shells to ricochet. It uses a V2 diesel engine producing around 500 horsepower, giving it excellent mobility with speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour. The advantage of the T-34 is balance. It combines mobility, armor, and firepower better than most tanks of its time. The downside is crew efficiency and visibility. Early models were hard to operate effectively. Fun fact, German crews initially struggled to deal with the T-34 due to its sloped armor and wide tracks. Tip: stay mobile, angle your armor, and avoid static fights. T-34 Model 1941. The T-34 Model 1941 builds on the original design with incremental improvements. Produced throughout 1941, it includes thicker armor in some areas and small refinements to production and reliability. Crew remains 4, with the same limitations in visibility and workload. The main weapon is still the 76mm F-34 gun, which remains effective against most early and mid-war German tanks. Armor is slightly improved, but still relies heavily on sloping for effectiveness. Engine performance remains similar, with around 500 horsepower and speeds close to 50 kilometers per hour. The advantage here is refinement. It's slightly more survivable and more consistent in performance. However, the core limitations remain: crew efficiency and lack of advanced optics. Fun fact, many T-34 Model 1941 tanks were produced during the chaotic evacuation of Soviet factories eastward. Tip: use aggressive movement and flanking. Don't rely purely on armor. T-34 Model 1942. The T-34 Model 1942 reflects wartime necessity. Production was massively increased, often at the cost of finish quality and comfort. Crew is still 4. The main gun remains the 76mm, but by this stage of the war, it begins to struggle against upgraded German tanks. Armor remains sloped, but quality can vary depending on production conditions. The engine remains the same V2 diesel, maintaining strong mobility. The biggest advantage is numbers and availability. These tanks can overwhelm enemies through sheer presence. The downside is declining effectiveness against improved enemy armor. Fun fact, some 1942 models were built so quickly that weld quality and optics suffered significantly. Tip: use them in groups, don't rely on individual performance. T-34-85. The T-34-85 represents the full evolution of the T-34 design. Introduced in 1944, it was built in massive numbers, over 20,000 units. Crew size increases to 5, finally giving the commander a dedicated role. The main weapon is the 85mm ZIS S-53 gun. This gun significantly improves anti-tank performance and can engage Panthers and Tigers under the right conditions. Armor remains similar in thickness, but benefits from improved turret design. Engine power remains around 500 horsepower with speeds up to 55 kilometers per hour. The advantage is versatility. It's effective against both infantry and tanks. The downside is that armor is still not strong enough to absorb heavy hits. Fun fact, the larger turret was one of the most important upgrades, improving command and control. Tip: use it as your main combat unit, balanced, flexible, and reliable. T-44. The T-44 is a transitional design between the T-34 and post-war tanks. Introduced in 1944, it saw limited production and minimal combat use. Crew size is 4, but with improved internal layout, it carries the same 85mm gun as the T-34-85. Armor is improved, especially in the frontal hull, with better angles and layout. The engine is repositioned, improving balance and survivability with similar power output. Speed remains around 50 kilometers per hour. The advantage is design efficiency. It's more modern and better protected. The downside is limited firepower improvement and low production numbers. Fun fact, the T-44 directly influenced the design of the T-54, one of the most successful tanks ever made. Tip: use it as a refined T-34, more survivable but still reliant on positioning. Soviet medium tanks weren't built to be perfect, they were built to win. Through constant evolution, massive production, and smart design choices, they became one of the most effective armored forces of World War II.